Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to an On the Couch episode of the Share.care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you the foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own selfish best interest to help others. Did you have a good day today? Interesting question, though. Let's jump in the Wayback Machine, go right back in time, and I'll take you on a journey. About 30 years ago, I was 19 or 20, I don't remember the exact year, it was a long time ago. And I was in Perth, and I was driving along the road, along the river there. And I was with my girlfriend with me, girlfriend at the time, with me. She was sitting in the front seat. She was holding a tape deck because in my car, my tape deck had actually broken. So she had one of those battery, boombox things, just a small one, but decent size. And in the back were three of my friends in the back seat as I was driving along. And for whatever reason, I wasn't paying attention to what was in front of me. Not a good thing to do when you're driving. And some cars had stopped. Turning right, so they were stopped in the middle lane. For those of you, because I'm in Australia, we drive on the right side of the road, technically, and so someone was turning right, and there's a bunch of cars all lined up, and so I've driven straight into the back of the car that was stopped, and so there's been a concertina effect. One car's smashed into the other, smashed into the other, smashed into the other. One of them was actually brand new as well. It was a week old. It was a second car in line. I do remember that. My girlfriend, who was holding the tape deck, that's flown up and hit her in the nose and broke her nose. And so that's, was quite tragic. And police have turned up, the ambulance has turned up, there's obviously blood everywhere because she had a broken nose. People in the back got a bit of whiplash. And to make matters worse, believe it or not, my girlfriend's parents drove past shortly after that happened, saw my car, it was a unique type of car, and so they're immediately panicking. This is before we're all carrying mobile phones. So they've done some blocks and they've found where the ambulance was, and then they've felt okay because although she had broken her nose, she was okay. And that's terrible in that people were hurt. From my perspective, the flow-on impact of that was quite significant because I wasn't insured as well. So I've hurt my girlfriend, hurt my friends, and I wasn't insured with that as well. And I was a long way from home and friends and things like that. So I had to deal with this all by myself. So after that, of course, I get contacted by the four other insurance companies chasing me for the money that they had paid out for their insurance. And that was a large sum of money. Well, back then for me it was a little bit over $60,000 in total damage that was caused. And I didn't have any, I had a job, I was in the army at the time. So I had a reasonably secure job, but it wasn't a high paying job. Certainly, back then compared, $60,000 was a lot. You could buy a house for that. And so I had to deal with that by myself. So there was a lot of legal letters that I get, letters of demand and negotiations, trying to work it out, not really knowing what I was doing. And the flow on from that was I entered into some arrangements where I'm paying money regularly to pay this debt off. As a consequence of that, I really didn't have much money. I didn't have a car for a long time. And on the positive side of that, I got a push bike, so I got quite fit riding around. I didn't really drink much either because I didn't have money to buy drink. So my health actually did improve a lot. But there was, and then over a period of time, I managed to save some money because I actually didn't realize, I wasn't paying attention, but I was I'd set up earlier a direct debit from my pay. This was back when we got paid cash. So we had to go and pick up your pay slip and got paid cash. And I'd forgotten that I'd set up this direct debit into a separate bank account, which is a great way to save money. If you want to save money, you set up a direct debit into another bank account, completely separate, preferably one, you can withdraw, but one that doesn't have an ATM card or something like that. And then, and ideally have it with a different bank, because then when you log onto your net banking or your online banking, you can't see it. And so I'd forgotten about that, this bank account. And it was about a year later, there was actually, somehow I got a statement, I can't remember how, I remembered that I had this bank account. And so I had some money in there. So it was enough money to look for another car to drive around. So I went and looked around. I found this old Toyota Celica, which is a cool car. But this one wasn't. It was white. It was white and rust-colored because it was rusty, a lot of rust in it. But it ran all right. And so I purchased that with the money that I had, and I had this car driving around. And I remember driving up the coast from Swanbourne up there, heading north, and I was driving along, and I still remember it to this day. I was thinking about why did this happen to me? Why did I, and I'm feeling, as I'm driving along, I'm feeling down, and looking at the cars coming at me, and I'm thinking, why is my life so terrible? And and my whole body's hunched over, and I'm driving, and it's like, and I would go often. I would do that. I'd be driving up, and I'd drive to a point on the beach. There's a place that I would stop, and I'd just sit there, and I'd just be looking out at the ocean and going, why does my life suck so much? Why is it? I still had a job, I was still working, and I think I actually had a lot of good friends and things and support as well, and met a lot of people and helped a lot of people as well. But there were times there where I was just not feeling great about things, and I would just sit there and I'd even had another tape deck back. So tape deck. This is how far we're going back. For you younger people listening, you can look that up and see what a tape deck is. And I would sit on the beach and I'd be playing sad songs, like songs that made me feel. And there was a couple of songs. Why does this happen to me? And it wasn't exact lyrics, but it was something like that, and how my life is miserable and stuff like that. And I'd be, just feeling down and worn out, and just like everything sucks. And it was a really interesting experience now that I look back at it. Especially I look back on the course of my life. That was a low point, and then I've had a number of high points and low points all through my life. And I've noticed, like with the high points in my life, I've never looked at it and gone, why me? Why have I got this success? I've never consciously anyway, not that I'm aware of, unconsciously either. I've looked at it, I've never gone and said, oh, why me, when the good things are happening. And the more I thought about that, and the research I was doing, and one, I was studying a bit of Shakespeare when I was doing some acting classes and things like that, and I was looking at it, and there's one phrase from Hamlet that stood out, and it was, nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. And that stuck in my mind. And it was like, what does that really mean? It's like, nothing's good or bad, thinking makes it so. And the more I've thought about that, the more I've realized that, because when you think about that, before I move on to that, but when you think about it, when you look at an event that happens, and let's say two people experience the same event, and this happens often, that event happens and people experience the same event, especially some tragic events. I remember there was a story I was listening to on a tape where they were talking about they're on a jungle tour and they got stuck and this lion was coming. And one person was completely freaking out, going, "Oh my God, lion's coming." And the other person was sitting there kind of going, "Yeah, lion's coming, it'll be right." And so it's the same event, but two very different reactions. And I was thinking about that, like with my reactions to my day. Nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. Is it a bad day? I was like, well, it's really my interpretation of what's happening that determines whether it's good or bad. And then I took that a step further to think about and go, well, how am I creating this day to be the way it is, the way I'm interpreting it? What's going on for me? And what I've found, and there's a lot of literature on this as I've found as well, is that how your unconscious processes things determines how your body reacts. So when something unfortunate happens, or something you don't want to happen, or someone, it might be, you're at a Christmas party. This is common, or it doesn't have to be Christmas if you're not into Christmas, or whatever. You're at a function, and someone there, you've got family members there, and how often have we had, or do you know of, some family member being at a party that's being a jerk and destroying it for everyone, and we all get upset at this family member. And so we think about it and go, well, okay, that's an event that happened. How, and your reaction to that is, again, your unconscious reaction first. So you've learned, because unconscious actions are learned. That's how athletes are trained. And that's how fighter pilots are trained, to act unconsciously through repeated behavior. And so when you have that experience, we default to, this is why people can have experience the same thing but react differently. We default to what we've taught ourselves. I'll say taught ourselves. Maybe when you're younger, you might be taught, but as you're older, you're reinforcing that anyway. So you're going to what you've taught yourself. Your unconscious is immediately, an event happens, it's an event. It has no meaning, it is an event. Now, we take that in, unconsciously we give it meaning, and that's through our unconscious, our beliefs, which are unconscious as well. And our beliefs are just a thought that you've repeated over and over again. So it's not, your belief isn't real, it's just a repeated thought. So the event happens, you got this person at the party that's being a jerk, your unconscious automatically switches to this mode, which might be, your body gets tight and you get angry and get frustrated. Or it might be another event where, someone tells you, oh, you've got to do this now. And you immediately go, oh my God, how am I going to do that? And your body kind of deflates, because that's the reaction of your unconscious mind, that your unconscious mind has been trained to react. Stimulus, result. So you get, the event is the stimulus, which is just an event. You have been trained to react a certain way through your unconscious. You just do it unconscious. You're not aware you're doing it. It's like when you're driving a car. You're not aware of the muscles that you're using to flick the indicator. You just do it. You go, okay, I need to turn. So the stimulus is we're approaching the intersection. Unconsciously, you flick the indicator to turn the car, or to indicate that you're turning the car. And you turn the steering wheel, which is, again, unconscious action. So same principle applies in that situation. And, what happens is we train ourselves in a certain way that we use our unconscious against us in those situations where things, when we look at it, are going so well. aren't going the way we want them to go would be more appropriate way of putting it. Because whether it's going well or not depends on how you use it. It's another podcast. But what you've done is, and this is like me sitting on the beach, I'm sitting there, I'm hunched over, I'm like breathing, really, oh God, this is, and there's a kind of a tightness in my chest, and it's like, oh, this is, and I'm hunched over, and it's like, oh, yeah, and feeling, and just try that. I mean, not if you're driving, but just try it if you're driving. Just hunch over and go, okay, I'm feeling really empowered now. I'm going to make this happen. It doesn't work. Whereas if you do the opposite, you sit up straight and go, okay, I'm going to make this happen. You put a bit of excitement into it. Oh, I'm going to make this happen. Yeah, I can do that. The difference in your body is tremendous. Now, to get to that, from that stimulus of this event, which is annoying, so you could be looking at the family member, that could be the same stimulus, and you might be going, oh yeah, here he goes again, and have a bit of a giggle about it, and just sit back and laugh. And imagine the whole family just sitting back and, instead of getting frustrated, because that's probably the reaction they want anyway, or just not aware of it, you sit back and do something else, react differently, and you get a different response. And that often happens like in conflict situations where you have a stimulus, someone gets angry, the other person, is like, don't offend me, and then they get angry back, and then you have this situation where it escalates. Whereas if you have a different unconscious reaction because you've trained yourself that way, it just becomes a normal thing. Someone gets angry at you, and you don't react. And that's something that I do all the time now. I mean, I've had that. I remember it was. I used to, one of the things I'd wear when I was wearing a suit. I wear the old style braces. I liked them at the time. I don't have any at the moment, but and I did work in construction as well. So I'd go to the construction sites, and because I always had a thing that I would dress to the level of whatever the client was, and for this particular project, or a number of the projects I was working on, the clients they did wear a jacket and a tie, so I wore a suit, but I wore my braces, and I remember it was an older guy, and he was always provoking a reaction. And one day he'd sit there and he grabbed my braces and flicked them out and let them snap back on me. And I just went, yeah, whatever. You're trying to get a reaction. That was my instant unconscious reaction. It wasn't like, how dare you touch me, or it was like, and maybe because I'm 6 foot and reasonably strong, those kind of circumstances don't faze me that much. But I didn't react to that, and then a few seconds later, after it was probably about 30 seconds later, after he goes, I wish I had the guts to wear the braces like you do. They're really cool. And he said it earnestly. So it was interesting. I could have reacted if it had been an older me. I would have probably reacted, "Don't touch me!" Or "How dare you!" and provoked a situation, or retaliated in a provoking way, which escalated the situation further. But I didn't, because I've trained myself unconsciously. Those things don't bother me. Similar, in the same person, before that happened, we're in a board meeting. I can't remember what exactly the remark was, but he made some snide remark as we're doing something like that, and I just let it go. Didn't, focusing on, this is the point, knowing that it was done for a reaction, and I just let it go. And we ended up having a really, really good relationship. And he actually, I got a lot of money, not me personally, but for my client, because he approved things that probably certainly when we first started the relationship, he wouldn't have approved. So there's so many extras that were like so many benefits because of the relationship that was built out of me not reacting in a way that I'd learnt to react many, many years. And when I say learnt to react, I remember a long time ago, although this was after the car accident, I was at helping with a friend's wedding, and someone pulled up. So this was a while ago, but they pulled up and parked where the bride was to park. And as they got there, they said, "What are you doing parking there? The bride's got to park there. Now, of course, they didn't know that. They just thought there was an empty parking spot. There was no markings or anything like that. But mine was to chastise them for parking where the bride was going to park. And so that was an unconscious reaction that I had learnt a long time ago and have since unlearnt. And that's how that, in the construction site that worked. And it's really interesting how we do that. So we learn through our own experiences how we're going to react to things. And that's, unless we consciously choose to do something different, we're going to repeat what's around us. Generally, the first where you learn from is from your parents. And then from there, your siblings learn from your parents as well, but from some wider friends. And then when you go to school, you learn from your school friends. But by that younger age, you've already developed a pattern of behaviour of how you're going to react to things. And then you start to believe that that's true. That is the reality. But it's just a learned reality. It's not the reality. It's just yours. So to do that, so how do you train your unconscious to do something different? Well, your unconscious, it learns from repeated inputs and emotional inputs. Now, a strong emotion, any type of strong emotion, is going to sink in faster to your unconscious than if you don't have that emotion. An example of this is, let's say you pick up a red hot piece of metal that's just come out of a fire. Well, that's going to burn, create significant pain in your body, and very quickly your mind will react and go, don't pick up something that's really hot. And that will be ingrained very quickly. And I'm not suggesting get a poker out and brand yourself into learning new unconscious behaviours. Another way you can do that, and this is again another podcast on this, just have a listen to that. But in summary, what you can do is in a very relaxed state of mind. So you can use things like Ho'oponopono type music to bring your brainwave state down, and then through that use suggestion to make that change happen more quickly. I've done that many times where I've wanted to change something, and behaviour changes, unconscious behaviours change very quickly. And if you can't do that, that's fine. All you do is you write it out, stick it on your mirror, you read it every day, and as you're reading it, visualize yourself reacting that way, and that will sink in eventually. Take longer, but it will work. And if that doesn't work, give us a call and we'll help you and we'll sort it out. So there's always help there. So that's the other thing to add to that is that you really have to want to do something different. And this is where that coming in. Did you have a good day today? It's like, well, changing your mindset and going, well, maybe, the event is just the event. Maybe I'm colouring it with my own beliefs, my own history, and making something out of the event that's happened, which is just an event. So this is that wanting to change. If you don't want to change, you're never going to change anything. That's just the way it is. It really doesn't. Most things I think in life are relatively simple in the sense of there's simple steps. The hard part is the willingness to want to change. When you overcome that part, the change actually happens very quickly. So that's where it's really important to want to change. Link some emotion to it if you can, if you know how to do that. If you don't know how, reach out and we'll help you. And then repeat the behaviour. And the more emotion you can link to it, the quicker it's going to change. And there's multiple readings you can look up on how to do this, but so we're here to help as well. And also really to remember that your beliefs are not real. They're just repeated thoughts. And a lot of times you don't even know those repeated thoughts have happened. And when you become aware of that, then it's like, oh, okay, actually, how do I want to react in this situation? What serves me? How do I use this? And that's where it really your life events, your day takes on a completely different meaning, because it's not the meaning that that it's not the outside event that's controlling you, because you're just reacting to what's happening in a way that you've been taught to react, or you've taught yourself to react. What you do then is the event happens, and your first thought can be, how does this serve me? How does this help me get what I want to have? Now, that's the presupposition there, is you know where you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, then an event is really just, it's going to be, your approach to that event is going to be a reaction. It's not going to be there. But if your approach to the event, your belief system is that, okay, this has happened. How can I use this? And that's not finding the good in bad. Because again, when people say, I've got to find the good in the bad situation, well, that's a presupposition that it is bad or is good. It's just an event. The reason that it makes, as Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. It's an event. And this is how, when you understand how your unconscious works, you can then put those strategies into place. And if you can do it unconsciously, it just happens automatically. So, and I'm sure most of you, when we're talking about this, have been thinking about, whether you've had a good day or a bad day. And certainly if you haven't been, just a suggestion of that now is, have you had a bad day? Well, yes. I'm sure everyone here is listening to this has had a bad day. And I'm sure the opposite is true. You've had a good day. What's the difference between the two? What's the difference in your body on that day? Because sometimes, no matter what happens, all these things happen which would normally, on a good day, terrible things can happen, or things that are annoying and frustrating, but it doesn't bother you. It doesn't stop you from having a good day. We've had that experience. And the same on a bad day. You can have all these wonderful things happen, but because you're running your bad day strategy, then it's a bad day. And this is where it's really important, from understanding how your unconscious works, to train yourself in a way to go, okay, it's an event. How can I use this? And when you get to that stage of it's automatic, so when things, and that doesn't mean you don't feel frustration. It doesn't mean you don't get annoyed. I get annoyed all the time. I feel frustrated all the time. But it's immediately channeled. Instead of going, I'm frustrated and I hunch over and I can't do anything, and it's like, oh, God, what am I going to do? I feel that frustration, and it's a different trigger. So I sit up and I go, okay, what can I do with this? How can I use this? How can this help me? And it's like that frustration. It's the same frustration. The energy is channeled a different way, because I choose it to be channeled a different way, because I've trained myself unconsciously that, every event, no matter what happens, I can use that somehow. And I've had some pretty terrible things happen that I've taken, and I felt frustrated. Now how can I use this? And it's like, immediately it's like, and it was difficult. I don't like using the word difficult. It was, the learned behavior kicked in a number of times, and it took a repeated amount to remind myself, when things happen, when I get frustrated, do something differently. And that, as you're listening to this podcast, what you don't know is that an hour before that, I got some, quote unquote, bad news. I was like, it became, again, that going, if it was the old me, I'd be going, and I'd be running around forever going, why this? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? But I didn't. I've got some bad news. Okay. How can I use this? And I'm not using it for the podcast purposes. I'm mentioning it now, but there's a whole bigger strategy of things that I'm working on going, actually, this is going to help. It's frustrating, and if I focus on it and this here and go, that's really not, this is an injustice, it's a huge injustice. But at the same time, I'm looking at it going, all right, not only how can I use it, but how can I use it to help other people? And when you switch it to that, when you add in how can I help other people, all of a sudden a whole new energy takes over. Because not only is this thing just an event, it's helpful to you, but it's helpful to others. Wow. How does that make your life different? How does that make your whole physiology different? Because, and unconsciously, this is happening. This is automatic. So it happened not long ago. It's an hour ago. I've gone, bang. I'm like, okay. And it's almost as though I went straight into this, how can I use this? How can this help me? How can this serve me? How can it help others? And that's where, again, we talk about it's in your own selfish best interest to help others. I felt good about it when I'm like, okay, how can I use this to help me? When I said added, unconsciously, it just kicked in. I didn't have to read anything. All of a sudden I went, but I can use this to help others as well. I actually sat up straighter. I noticed it. I sat up straighter. I felt stronger. I felt more empowered. And it's like, yeah, this is a thing that I can use to help others. And it really changed the whole, well, I was going to say it's changed the whole dynamic, but it didn't change the whole dynamic. It was my unconscious reaction. Before I had to work at it a bit. I had to go, okay, well, how can this serve me? It's just an event. It's not bad. Me thinking, oh, what has happened to me? That's my old thinking. That's something that I've learned and I can unlearn. I just replace it with something else. Now that I'm feeling full of energy right now as I'm recording this, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have even been able to record it. I would have been so busy, upset about why this happens to me and why is it not fair and yada, 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 and it goes on. So when something happens, firstly, how do you want to react to things? And what do you choose for your life? And I'm a big, if you go to my website, there's a free downloadable that talks about what do you choose. And I ask what you choose specifically. I don't ask what do you want, because a lot of times when you ask people what do you want, they don't know, and it's like, oh, I don't know what I want and stuff like that. So that's why I don't ask that question. I ask what do you choose, and the reason why I ask what do you choose is because it triggers something different in your mind. Go, hang on a minute, I've got a choice, and that's what I'm getting to this whole podcast is: did you have a good day? What did you choose to have today? When you look at it, and this is where gratitude kicks in as well, and it's like, well, what can I use from today to help me get where I need to go? Not what was good in it, because that the presupposition of something is good or bad. It's what can I use? How can this serve me? Very subtle differences, but powerful differences in the questions you ask yourself. How can this serve me? How can I use this? And yes, do I want to be going through it would be if, this event that happened an hour ago, would it be my preference to not have that? Definitely. It'd be, if I could choose that, I wouldn't choose it. So it's not on my list of things to choose, but that's outside of my control. But what I can choose is how I react to that. And I can choose to react to it unconsciously. So like using the indicator in your car, you can just go, event happens, bang, and switch, and away you go. Also, just bang, and just reaction is there. So you're not even switching. You get to that point where it's automatic. So really have a think about that. What do you choose? How do you choose to react to events that happen to you? And if you choose to react different, if you choose to be in control, and this is where it can serve, especially in those situations I mentioned earlier, when someone's getting angry at you, having the choice to react differently, instead of getting all frustrated and defensive, it's like unconsciously going, that's interesting. And you go, what do they really want here? And it's amazing how much that empathy, instead of reacting with anger, going, hang on, what's going on there? What are you experiencing? What's happened? Tell me more. And they're all of a sudden in a different situation because they're used to getting angry, someone reacting angry back. It's great fun to do. Just even as I used to do it as a game, but with a serious bit of me, but I did enjoy doing that. Like deliberately reacting different to how people would expect in a nice way. And people, it was just funny to watch. I wasn't laughing out loud, but it's just really, when I say funny, I mean interesting. It's just watching going how people would get really angry at you, and you reacted with some sort of kindness or understanding or compassion, and all of a sudden their anger had nowhere to go. It just deflates, and you're able to work through that. So this is where it's like, again, in your own, not only that, in your own selfish best interest, anger is not really good for your health. Well, not really. It's not good for your health. Being angry makes your whole body tighter and ages you and all that kind of stuff. So that's where having that different reaction is having a reaction where every event serves you is just that statement. Every event serves you. That's the reaction you have. So, and the way you do that is, notice what you choose. Do you choose to react in a way that's beneficial to you and to getting where you want to go? And then choosing to react differently, and then going through that process of understanding how your unconscious works or how to train your unconscious. And that comes through repetition and emotion. Just repeat it. Firstly, you want to, then link some emotion to it if you can, and repeat it until that sinks in. That, again, that's how they train athletes, how they train pilots. It's the same thing for you. You just have to repeat it, drill it in over and over again.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.